Caretaker is a wireless patient monitor. It basically is this really neat like little finger cuff that attaches to your finger. So rather than like the clunky blood pressure monitor that most folks use, they've had this really cool technology that transmits Bluetooth over Bluetooth the patient's vitals just through that little finger cuff. And that is really important for clinicians because they get real-time monitoring of how patients are responding to ketamine or to other psychedelic medicine. So super important for how they deliver care and for how they measure safety. But from a research perspective, really interesting too, because we can actually start getting real-time physiological understanding of ketamine, and maybe like the dosage amount affects that. Maybe there's some correlation between like physiological response and overall treatment efficacy. I think there are lots of really cool research questions and we could ask, but we're excited about that partnership because we basically will have a direct integration from their monitor into our electronic health records. So from not just from a clinical perspective, but from a time perspective, clinicians aren't going to have to take the physical measurements of vitals and wrap that clunky blood monitor pressure around cuff around people. They can just automatically use the wireless remote monitor and it'll get uploaded into our EHR.
So with Osmind, there's this EHR component where you're providing software for clinicians and using that data in interesting ways. You mentioned there's also a research component. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think for us, like research definitely bleeds between both what the clinician is doing and with even developing or new diagnostics and therapies. I think what's so exciting about psychedelic medicine and ketamine is that like the clinicians are the researchers. It's not people in white coats in labs doing their own thing and then clinicians doing a totally different thing. So many of our clinicians have or are interested in publishing. So we're really excited about returning some of their clinics' data and insights back to them so they can publish on it. I think the second component is we're really excited about new therapies being developed, whether psychedelic or just psychedelic inspired. And I think a lot of the information that we're collecting and aggregating on a national level is really useful for that. So for example, we know very well a company working on developing a ketamine analog, and they're interested in, we're trying to get these through clinical trials, and the ketamine analog is different than ketamine in that it basically reduces the hallucinogenic effect, which obviously people have different opinions about that, but could make it easier to commercialize because there are fewer safety requirements. Like maybe a big problem with Spravato, for example, the enantiomer, of ketamine is that it requires like a lot of safety monitoring and patients have to stay in the office and it then becomes pretty expensive. Some companies are working on developing analogs to alter the safety profiles and alter the dissociative effects so that it might actually become more affordable for patients in a way. And I know there are different opinions on the effectiveness of that, and I think jury's out on the research side, but we're excited about using some of our information to inform that type of development. So for example, if this company with a ketamine analog, if they're running a clinical trial and they're like, gosh, which patients are going to respond best to our ketamine analog? Like what sorts of background should we be looking at, or what sorts of medical histories? Like that's pretty good information that we have that we might be able to help them to better develop those drugs.